I still remember the weight of that different uniform in my hands. The fabric felt heavier somehow, as if the burgundy color itself added mass that the navy blue of my classmates' uniforms didn't possess. I was 12 years old, standing in the administration office of Westbrook Middle School, trying to understand why the secretary was handing me something different from what everyone else would be wearing. "But why is mine a different color?" I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. Mrs. Pendleton, the school's secretary, barely looked up from her computer. "That's what Ms. Harrison assigned for you. You'll need to take it up with her if you have questions." I clutched the burgundy uniform to my chest, feeling my heart race. This was supposed to be my fresh start. New school, new opportunities. My father had moved us to this district specifically because of its reputation for academic excellence. Now, on the day before classes officially began, I was being singled out without explanation. Ms. Harrison was the assistant principal, a woman I'd only met briefly during our initial tour of the school. She had smiled at my father but had barely acknowledged me. I remembered how her eyes had skimmed over me, noting my braids, my skin, my existence, before returning to my father with practiced pleasantness. "Is Ms. Harrison available?" I managed to ask. "She's in a meeting. You can take the uniform and go. Nia, your father already paid the fees." I left the office with more questions than answers, my excitement about starting a new school evaporating with each step. The hallways were mostly empty, with just a few teachers preparing their classrooms for the year ahead. I passed a display, case filled with photos of academic achievement awards, science fair winners, and debate team champions. Not a single face that looked like mine stared back from behind the glass. When I got home, my father was still at work. He'd taken on extra shifts at the hospital where he worked as a respiratory therapist to afford our move to this neighborhood. I placed the uniform on my bed and stared at it, trying to convince myself that maybe there was a logical explanation. Maybe 6th graders wore burgundy and 7th graders wore navy. Maybe it was some kind of organizational system based on homeroom assignments. But deep down, I knew better. I had seen other incoming 6th graders at orientation, all clutching, navy blue uniforms identical to one another, all except for me. I didn't want to bother my father with this. He had been so proud, so hopeful about this new start. After my mother passed away 3 years earlier, he had devoted himself entirely to ensuring I had every opportunity to succeed. This school represented everything he had been working toward. When he came home that evening, I had already put the uniform away in my closet. "How's my brilliant girl?" he asked, placing a kiss on top of my head as I sat at the kitchen table working on a summer reading assignment. "I'm good," I lied, keeping my eyes on my book. "How was work?" "Busy, but good. Did you pick up your uniform today?" I nodded, still not looking up. "Can I see it? I bet you'll look sharp." I hesitated, then closed my book. "It's different from what the other kids are wearing." My father's brow furrowed. "Different how?" "It's burgundy. Everyone else has navy blue." He paused, and I could see him processing this information, considering all possibilities before jumping to conclusions. A habit from his medical training. "Are you sure about that, Nia? Maybe there are different colors for different grades, or—" "No, Dad. I saw the other 6th graders at orientation. They all have navy." He set down his keys and took a seat beside me at the table. "Show me." I retrieved the uniform, and he examined it carefully, running his fingers over the embroidered school crest that matched the one on the navy uniforms, the only element that was identical. "Did they give you any explanation for this?" His voice was calm but I knew my father well enough to detect the undercurrent of concern. The secretary just said Ms. Harrison assigned it to me, and that I should take it up with her if I had questions. My father folded the uniform neatly and placed it on the table between us. Then that's exactly what we'll do. Together. We arrived at school early the next morning, a full hour before classes were scheduled to begin. My father had rearranged his shift, something I knew wasn't easy for him to do. He wore his best sweater and dress pants, his meeting important people outfit, as he called it. The hallways were quiet as we made our way to the administration office. Mrs. Pendleton was already at her desk, sorting through a stack of forms. "Good morning," my father said pleasantly. "I'm Robert Montgomery, Nia's father. We'd like to speak with Miss Harrison, please." Mrs. Pendleton glanced up, her eyes moving from my father to me and back again. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but this will only take a moment of her time." "I'm afraid Miss Harrison is very busy with the start of the school year. Perhaps you could come back." "This concerns the start of the school year," my father interrupted, still smiling but with a firmness I recognized. "It's about my daughter's uniform." At the mention of the uniform, something shifted in Mrs. Pendleton's expression, a flicker of discomfort, quickly masked. "I'll see if she's available," she said, picking up the phone on her desk. While she spoke in hushed tones, my father placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Remember," he whispered, "you have every right to ask questions, and you deserve answers. Stand tall." Miss Harrison emerged from her office a few minutes later. She was a tall woman with short blonde hair and thin lips pressed into what might have been attempting to be a smile. "Mr. Montgomery, what a pleasure to see you again. And Nia, ready for your first day?" She didn't wait for a response before continuing. "I understand you have a concern about the uniform. Why don't we step into my office to discuss this?" My father nodded, and I followed them into the small office lined with educational certificates and framed photographs of Miss Harrison shaking hands with various important-looking people. "Now, what seems to be the issue?" she asked once we were seated. My father placed the burgundy uniform on her desk. "My daughter was given this uniform yesterday, which is different from the standard navy blue uniform that the other students wear. We'd like to understand why." Miss Harrison's smile didn't waver. "Ah, yes. Well, Mr. Montgomery, as I'm sure you're aware, Westbrook is an academically rigorous environment. We have certain standards and traditions that have served our community well for generations. I'm not sure I understand what that has to do with my daughter's uniform being a different color," my father said. "We find that transitioning students benefit from a period of adaptation before fully integrating into our community," she replied. "The burgundy uniform helps our faculty identify which students might need additional guidance as they adjust to our rigorous expectations." My stomach clenched. Transitioning students. The words hung in the air, their implication clear enough even to my 12-year-old ears. "Are all new students given burgundy uniforms, then?" my father asked. Miss Harrison hesitated. "Well, not exactly. We make assessments based on various factors." "What factors?" My father's voice remained even, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "Previous academic records, recommendations, cultural background. We found this system helps ease the transition for students who might otherwise struggle to assimilate into our community." "Cultural background," my father repeated slowly. "I see. And how many other students will be wearing burgundy uniforms today?" Another hesitation. "As of now, Nia would be the only one this term." I felt my face grow hot with embarrassment and anger. I was being mocked, separated, before I'd even had a chance to prove myself. So you're requiring my daughter, who maintained straight A's at her previous school and scored in the 98th percentile on her placement tests, to wear a uniform that singles her out as someone who needs additional guidance. His voice remained calm, but I could hear the controlled fury beneath. Mr. Montgomery, please understand that our policies are designed with the students' best interests at heart. We've found that certain students simply adjust better when given special attention. Certain students, my father echoed. Ms. Harrison, I want to be very clear. My daughter will not be wearing a different uniform from her peers. Either she receives the standard Navy uniform like everyone else, or we'll need to discuss this matter further. Perhaps with the school board or other interested parties. Ms. Harrison's smile tightened. I'm afraid our uniform policies are non-negotiable, Mr. Montgomery. The burgundy uniform is what has been assigned to Nia, and that's what she'll need to wear if she wishes to attend Westbrook. My father stood up slowly. Then I believe we'll need to escalate this discussion. Come, Nia. I rose to follow him, my heart pounding. I had never seen my father back down from anything he believed was right, but I had also never seen him this angry. Mr. Montgomery, Miss Harrison called as we reached the door. I hope you'll reconsider. Westbrook has so much to offer a promising student like Nia. My father turned back. Yes, it does. And Nia has much to offer Westbrook, but not at the cost of her dignity. We left the office in silence. As we walked through the now bustling hallways, I could see students in their identical Navy uniforms, chatting and laughing as they prepared for the first day. I felt both relief at not having to wear the burgundy uniform and anxiety about what would happen next. What now, Dad? I asked once we were in the car. He looked at me, his expression softening. Now we fight, but smart. This isn't just about a uniform, Nia. You understand that, right? I nodded. Of course I did. It was about being marked as different, as less than, before I'd even had a chance. We have options, he continued. The school district has an anti-discrimination policy. The local news stations are always interested in stories about educational equity. And I happen to know a civil rights attorney who owes me a favor. Are you going to sue the school? The idea both terrified and thrilled me. That would be a last resort. First we document everything, then we go up the chain of command. The principal, the superintendent, the school board. We give them a chance to do the right thing. And if they don't? My father smiled grimly. Then we make sure everyone knows about it. That afternoon, while other kids were finishing their first day at Westbrook, I was sitting in our living room as my father made phone calls. First to Principal Douglas, who claimed to be unaware of the uniform situation but promised to look into it. Then to his friend Marcus, who happened to be a reporter for the local newspaper. Finally to Ms. Elaine Chung, the civil rights attorney who had once been his patient. It's a clear case of discriminatory treatment, she said when she arrived at our house that evening. They're using the uniform as a visual marker of otherness. It's subtle, but effective, and completely unacceptable. What's our next step? My father asked. Documentation and escalation. I'll draft a formal complaint to the superintendent and the school board, citing the relevant anti-discrimination policies. She turned to me. Nia, do you still have that burgundy uniform? I nodded. Good. We'll need that. And I'd like you to write down everything you remember about your interaction with the school staff. Every word, every impression. Can you do that? I nodded again, feeling a strange mix of anxiety and resolve. This was bigger than just me now. The next day, instead of attending Westbrook, I spent the morning writing out my account while my father took photographs of both uniforms side by side. In the afternoon, we met Ms. Chung at the district offices, where she had arranged a meeting with Superintendent Walsh. Superintendent Walsh was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a perpetually worried expression that only deepened as Ms. Chung laid out our case. "This is the first I'm hearing of any burgundy uniforms," he said, examining the photographs. "Our district policy clearly states that all Westbrook students wear navy blue. Yet here we are," Ms. Chung replied. Ms. Harrison specifically told Mr. Montgomery that the burgundy uniform was assigned to his daughter to mark her as someone needing additional guidance due to her cultural background. The superintendent winced. "If that's accurate, it's completely unacceptable and contrary to our district's values of inclusion and equity." "We're glad to hear that," my father said. "So you'll ensure that Nia receives the standard uniform and that this practice stops immediately?" "Of course. I'll speak with Principal Douglas and Ms. Harrison today. This will be resolved by tomorrow morning." We left feeling cautiously optimistic. On the drive home, my father explained that sometimes systems change when good people within them become aware of problems. "Not everyone at that school is like Ms. Harrison," he said. "There are teachers and administrators who genuinely care about education and fairness. We just need to make sure they know what's happening." The next morning we returned to Westbrook. Principal Douglas met us in the lobby, his expression grave. "Mr. Montgomery, Nia, I want to personally apologize for the uniform situation. It appears there was a serious misunderstanding. Ms. Harrison exceeded her authority in creating a separate uniform designation that was never approved by myself or the district." He handed me a standard navy blue uniform, identical to what the other students wore. "We value diversity at Westbrook," he continued, "and we want every student to feel welcomed and respected. I hope you'll give us another chance to prove that." I looked at my father, who nodded encouragingly. "Thank you," I said, taking the uniform. "I'm looking forward to starting classes." "Wonderful," Principal Douglas said, visible relief crossing his face. "Your homeroom teacher, Mrs. Chen, is expecting you, and if you have any concerns at all, my door is always open." As we walked toward my classroom, my father squeezed my shoulder. "Remember, stand tall," he whispered. "You belong here as much as anyone." I thought that would be the end of it. I would start classes, wear my navy uniform like everyone else, and the burgundy uniform would become nothing more than an unpleasant memory. I was wrong. When I arrived at Mrs. Chen's classroom wearing my navy uniform, the other students stared, not in the usual new kid way, but with particular interest, as if they were expecting something else. As I took an empty seat, I overheard whispers. "That's her. I thought she was supposed to have a different uniform. My mom said it's because she's from the East Side." My heart sank. Somehow word had spread about the burgundy uniform, even though I'd never actually worn it to class. I kept my eyes forward, trying to focus on Mrs. Chen's welcome message, but I could feel the weight of 27 pairs of eyes on my back. At lunch, I sat alone, picking at my food and wishing I could disappear. A group of girls at the next table kept glancing over, then turning back to whisper among themselves. Finally, one of them, a girl with long blonde hair and expensive-looking shoes, approached. "Hi, I'm Amber," she said, sitting down across from me. "You're Nia, right? The girl who was supposed to have the special uniform?" I nodded, unsure what to say. "My mom's on the PTA with Ms. Harrison," she continued. She said you got special treatment because your dad complained. That's not what happened, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The burgundy uniform was discrimination. My dad stood up for what was right. Amber looked genuinely confused. But my mum said the burgundy uniforms are for scholarship students, so teachers know who needs extra help. I'm not on scholarship, I replied, and I don't need extra help. I got in based on my test scores, just like everyone else. She shrugged, clearly unconvinced. Whatever. Just so you know, Ms. Harrison is really mad. She told my mom that some people don't appreciate opportunities when they're given to them. With that, she returned to her table, leaving me with a hollow feeling in my stomach. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. When I told my father about the encounter that evening, his expression darkened. They're trying to reframe it, he said. Make it seem like we're the unreasonable ones. Classic deflection. What do we do? Now? I asked. We stay the course. You focus on your studies, make friends with the kids who see past this nonsense, and document anything that feels like retaliation or continued discrimination. Over the next few weeks, I did exactly that. I raised my hand in class, completed all my assignments, and tried to connect with classmates who seemed open to knowing the real me. There were some, like Jose from my science class and May from orchestra, who either hadn't heard the rumors or didn't care about them. But I also documented the slights. How Ms. Harrison would inspect my uniform whenever she saw me in the hallway, her eyes narrowing as if hoping to find a violation. How certain teachers seemed to call on me only when I didn't raise my hand. How my clearly correct answers on a social studies quiz were marked wrong, without explanation. Then came the photography incident. Each year, Westbrook featured students' achievements in their promotional materials and on their website. A professional photographer came to take pictures of students engaged in various activities. When he arrived in my advanced math class, the teacher, Mr. Collins, arranged us for a group shot. Nia, perhaps you could move to the back row, he suggested, despite the fact that I was one of the shorter students in the class. I complied, but noticed how the photographer frowned, then rearranged several students for better composition, moving everyone except me. In the final arrangement, only the very top of my head was visible behind two taller boys. Later that day, the photographer was in the cafeteria, taking candid shots of students during lunch. I noticed how his camera lingered on tables full of laughing, predominantly white students, while skipping past more diverse groupings. I mentioned this to Jose, who had become a good friend. You should tell your dad, he said. My cousin had something similar happen at his school in California. Turned out they were using the photos to make the school look more white than it actually was for their brochures. That evening, I added the photography observations to the journal I'd been keeping at Ms. Chung's suggestion. When my father reviewed it, he was silent for a long moment. This is systematic, he finally said. They're trying to minimize your presence, make you invisible, while still technically allowing you to attend. The next day, Ms. Chung filed an addendum to our complaint with the district, detailing what appeared to be a pattern of continued discrimination. Superintendent Walsh assured us he would address these concerns immediately. But it was Marcus, my father's reporter friend, who really changed the game. 3 days after we filed the addendum, his article appeared in the Sunday edition of the local newspaper. Uniform discrimination. At elite middle school, student given different uniform based on cultural background. The article included the photographs my father had taken of the two uniforms side by side, as well as quotes from educational equity experts and anonymous sources within the school, who confirmed that this wasn't the first time minority students had been subject to different treatment. By Monday morning, the story had been picked up by regional news outlets and was trending on social media. When I arrived at school, there was a news van parked outside. Principal Douglas looked harried as he hurried from his car to the building, ignoring reporters' questions. In homeroom, Mrs. Chen tried to maintain normalcy, but the tension was palpable. Some students whispered and pointed when I walked in. Others pointedly looked away. A few, like May, gave me encouraging smiles. "My parents read the article," she whispered as we lined up for PE. "My dad says your father is a hero for standing up to them." During lunch, I was surprised when Amber sat down across from me again. "Is it true," she asked without preamble, "that they tried to make you wear a different uniform because you're black?" I hesitated, then nodded. "That's messed up," she said, looking genuinely troubled. "My mom says it's not like that you're making a big deal over nothing, but I don't know. If someone tried to make me wear a different uniform from everyone else, I'd be pretty upset too." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it felt like a small crack in the wall of isolation I'd been experiencing. After school, my father picked me up instead of having me take the bus, concerned about the media attention. As we drove home, he explained that the district had called an emergency meeting for that evening. "They want to resolve this quickly, now that it's public," he said. Superintendent Walsh sounded desperate to make it go away. "What do they want to do?" "They're offering to issue a public apology, review all uniform and photography policies, and provide anti-bias training for all staff." They also mentioned the possibility of personnel changes. "You mean firing Ms. Harrison?" The thought made me uneasy, despite everything. My father glanced at me. "You're worried about her losing her job?" It wasn't a question. He knew me too well. "It's just, I don't want to be responsible for someone losing their livelihood," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "Your compassion does you credit, Nia. But remember, you're not responsible for the consequences of her actions. She made choices that hurt you and likely other students before you. Accountability isn't punishment. It's an opportunity for growth and change." The emergency meeting that evening was tense. The school board members sat grim-faced as Superintendent Walsh presented the proposed resolution. My father and Ms. Chung listened carefully, occasionally conferring in whispers. When they asked for my input, I took a deep breath. "I don't want special treatment," I said. "I never did. I just want the same opportunities and respect as everyone else. If the school is serious about making changes, I'm willing to give them that chance. But I think those changes need to include hearing from other students who might have had similar experiences." The board members exchanged glances. One of them, an older woman with silver hair, nodded approvingly. "Well said, young lady. I believe we should add a student advisory committee to our resolution, one that specifically addresses equity concerns and includes diverse representation." In the end, the resolution passed unanimously. The district would issue a public apology, review all policies that might unintentionally promote discrimination, implement comprehensive anti-bias training, create a student advisory committee on equity, and place Ms. Harrison on administrative leave pending further investigation. As we left the meeting, a reporter approached us. "Mr. Montgomery, do you feel the district's response is adequate?" My father looked at me, silently asking if I wanted to respond. I nodded. "The true test will be in the implementation," I said, surprising myself with my confidence. Words and policies matter, but actions matter more. I hope this situation helps create a school where every student feels valued and respected, regardless of their background." The reporter looked impressed. "You have a very articulate daughter, Mr. Montgomery." My father smiled proudly. "Yes, I do, and Westbrook is fortunate to have her as a student." The aftermath of the uniform incident brought changes I hadn't expected. Some were institutional. Ms. Harrison was eventually reassigned to an administrative role at the district office, away from direct student interaction. A comprehensive review of school policies revealed other problematic practices that were subsequently changed. The newly formed Student Equity Committee became an influential voice in school decisions. But there were personal changes, too. Some students who had ignored or avoided me before now sought me out, curious about the girl who had stood up to the system. Others maintained their distance, influenced by parents who viewed the situation through a different lens. What surprised me most, though, was how many students, and even some teachers, quietly thanked me for speaking up, sharing their own stories of feeling marginalized or invisible. Mrs. Chen pulled me aside after class one day, about a month after everything had settled down. "I want you to know," she said softly, "that what you and your father did was important. Not just for you, but for all of us, who believe education should be about elevation, not separation." She hesitated, then added, "There were others before you, students who were given those burgundy uniforms and whose parents either didn't question it or felt they couldn't fight it. You've changed things for those who will come after you, too." I carried those words with me through the rest of middle school and beyond. They reminded me that standing up for what's right isn't just about personal vindication. It's about creating space for others to be treated with dignity, too. By the time I graduated from Westbrook, the burgundy uniforms were long gone, relegated to a shameful chapter in the school's history. The administration had become a model for inclusive practices, with regular training and open dialogues about implicit bias and educational equity. I had flourished academically and socially, finding my voice not just as a student but as an advocate. My father, always my biggest supporter, never once said, "I told you so," or took credit for the changes. Instead, he simply reminded me of what he'd said that very first day. "Stand tall. You belong." 20 years later, those words still echo in my mind as I walk the halls of Westbrook Middle School, now as Dr. Nia Montgomery, the first black principal in the school's history. The burgundy uniform incident, as it came to be known, is taught in the school's own social studies curriculum as a case study in discrimination and the power of speaking truth to power. Sometimes, after a long day of meetings and administrative tasks, I'll pause by the display case in the main hallway, the same one that once contained no faces that looked like mine. Now it showcases the diverse achievements of students from all backgrounds, a visual testament to how far we've come. Last week, something extraordinary happened. I was reviewing applications for a teaching position when a name caught my eye. Amber Wilson. The same Amber who had approached me in the cafeteria all those years ago. Curious, I read her personal statement, which began with a surprising confession. My educational philosophy was shaped by a pivotal moment in my middle school years, when I witnessed discrimination firsthand and initially failed to recognize it as such. Watching a fellow student stand firm in the face of systemic inequality taught me that education must be a place where every child is seen, valued, and treated with equal dignity. I invited Amber for an interview. When she walked into my office, recognition dawned in her eyes almost immediately. "Nia Montgomery," she said, a mixture of surprise and something like awe in her voice. I should have made the connection when I saw the principal's name, but I never imagined. Life has a way of bringing things full circle, I said, gesturing for her to take a seat. Your application is impressive. 15 years of teaching experience, specialized training in culturally responsive education, glowing recommendations. She looked down at her hands. I've been trying to make amends in a way. After what happened with the uniforms, after watching how you handled it all with such grace and determination, I couldn't stop thinking about it. In college, I started studying educational equity, trying to understand how I could have been so blind to what was happening right in front of me. We were children, I reminded her, products of the environments and systems around us. Yes, but I want you to know that you changed my life, Nia. You made me question narratives I'd accepted without thought. You're the reason I became a teacher. We talked for nearly 2 hours, well beyond the scheduled interview time. She told me about her journey, how she'd taught in underserved communities, developed anti-bias curricula, and worked to ensure that no student under her care ever felt marginalized or other. When she left, I sat in my office reflecting on the strange symmetry of life, how the girl who had once approached me to tell me I didn't belong was now asking me for an opportunity to help create belonging for others. The next day, I offered her the position. Sometimes, I wonder what Ms. Harrison would think if she could see Westbrook now, with me as principal and Amber as our newest faculty member. Would she recognize the profound error in her attempt to mark me as different, less than? Would she understand that her burgundy uniform accomplished the opposite of what she intended? Not containing me, but catalyzing changes that would transform the institution she thought she was protecting? I hope she would. I hope she's learned, grown, evolved in the years since, just as Amber did. Just as we all must. If you've ever faced discrimination or been made to feel like you don't belong, I hope you know that standing up for yourself isn't just about the moment. It's about creating ripples that extend far beyond what you can see. My father taught me that dignity isn't negotiable, that justice sometimes requires courage, and that one voice raised in truth can change more than you imagine. What would you have done in my place? Would you have worn the burgundy uniform quietly? Or fought back like we did? I'd love to hear your stories of standing tall in the face of injustice. Share this with someone who might need to be reminded that they belong exactly as they are. Because in the end, the uniforms we wear matter far less than the integrity we bring to wearing them.